If rock bottom had a floor, the Denver Broncos fell through it in Sunday's massive collapse against the Washington Commanders. What happened after that first quarter? We'll dive deeper into that and much more. Today's brand new episode, Locked on Broncos.
You are Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network. Your team every day.
The Denver Broncos dropped to 0-2 on the season after a very, very disappointing loss at home to the Washington Commanders on Sunday. A massive collapse at Empower Field at Mile High. Welcome into a brand new episode, Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much to everybody in Broncos Country for tuning in, making us your first listen of the day every single day. You can get this podcast for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. So do us a favor, hit that subscribe button down below so you can go through this therapy session with myself and everybody in Broncos Country, because this is not what any of us had expected of this team so far to start the season. I'm your host, as always, Cody Roark, Broncos reporter for Mile High Sports. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by our friends over there, LinkedIn Jobs. They help you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Broncos Country, here we are, heading into week 3 of the NFL season, and the Denver Broncos are sitting at 0-2. And the unfortunate dilemma of this entire situation on this post-cast therapy session that we're about to have here is the Broncos shouldn't have been in this position in the first place when you consider how the flow of the game went. All right, so let's set the stage here. We all know what happened. The Broncos, they jumped off to a 21-3 lead over the Washington Commanders. Their first 3 drives on the offensive side of the ball were efficient. It was beautiful. And all of a sudden, it gave, I think, everybody the feeling and the vibe that, hey, Russell Wilson is back. The Denver Broncos are back. Sean Payton, he's got this team exactly where he wants them to be. 21-3. It was a great, great sight to see because Denver came out firing. Russ came out firing. He was 5 of 6 at one point. He threw 3 touchdowns on the afternoon. Now, obviously, first off, Denver got things going because they were able to get a stop on the Commanders. Jaleel McLaughlin goes out. He runs for his first career NFL touchdown in the regular season. Welcome to the NFL, rookie, right? These moments right here, right? It's exciting. And all of a sudden, at 21-3, you're thinking, okay, hey, you know what? Denver might just run all over the Commanders in this situation here, especially after you see Marvin Mims coming in and having a big game. I mean, 2 catches for 113 yards and 1 touchdown, a 45-yard punt return that really helped set things up for Denver as well. And then Brandon Johnson getting involved on the offensive side of the ball. Denver's offense was in a great spot. And then one negative play happened here. So really, I think when we look at this game, first 3 drives, touchdown, touchdown, touchdown. Then you look at where Denver had the 21-3 lead. Well, they got outscored 32-9 in the second half in totality. I mean, that's going from the second quarter to the third quarter and the fourth quarter. I mean, Denver just suddenly fell. Like, they lost the footing beneath them. They couldn't get back up. And it was one of the most puzzling things, I can tell you this, that I've ever seen. And look, Broncos Country, you know me. I'm a former player. I'm a former coach. I look at the game a little bit differently than I think most people, right? And I'm usually always like, okay, if I'm looking at this from a coach's perspective, what are things that we can build off of, right? That's usually my mindset here. I'm usually the optimistic one here. And usually I always try to approach things with logic. But I'm a little fired up right here because just watching this game and seeing Denver give the illusion of 21-3, it's like, all right, hey, Denver's back. All of a sudden, it's like I came away from Sunday feeling so sorry for Broncos fans. I mean, there was one point where they punched in, the Commanders punched in another touchdown late in that fourth quarter, and I just saw massive, massive droves of Broncos fans leaving the stadium. And it's like, I don't blame them. After giving up a lead that you had the lead right there. After giving that up and just being outscored, at one point it was 32-3. That is disappointing, and Broncos Country deserves better than what they got on Sunday. And for some reason, the moment I think we all feel like Denver is back, they take 3 steps forward, but then they take 4 steps backward. And that was a prime example here in this game. They had a stretch of 4 straight drives where it was fumble, punt, interception there. And then Washington went on to go touchdown, field goal, touchdown. Then they missed a field goal, which still, I mean, Denver was in the game at that point. And all of a sudden, we're wondering, how did the Broncos get here? And it goes back to one play. And unfortunately, Broncos Country, one negative play snowballed into a whole entire series of negative events that contributed to the outcome of this game. And really, it was the Russell Wilson fumble that he had there. And look, that's a tough thing, but you got to protect the football. Now, I will say the official missed a grab of the face mask on Russ by a Commander's defender. Then he fumbled the ball. They picked it up. And then from that point forward, Denver's defense started snowballing and kind of falling apart there. They played a lot of off coverage because it's really predicated off of zone. And Sam Howell, got to give a tip of a cap to him. He was a fantastic player for the Commanders. He threaded the ball into some tight windows, and he was just delivering in Sunday's game. Unfortunately, it's going to lead to a Denver Broncos loss 35-33 here. But that was the defining moment. The Russell Wilson fumble, the Kareem Jackson, a few moments after that. I mean, Denver was facing a 4th and goal. Howell delivers a strike to Logan Thomas. Kareem launches himself into Logan Thomas to try to dislodge the ball, makes contact with his head, knocks him out, and look, he held onto the football. And in a situation like that, 2 weeks in a row, Kareem just coming off of a fine, the NFL officials, they ejected Kareem Jackson from that game. And so Delarian Turner-Yell had to come in and step in and play safety. But from that point, I think those two plays were the catalyst that really led to a negative snowball effect of lost momentum for Denver. And then all of a sudden, it's a different conversation going into halftime. It's 21-11 rather than it being 21-3 at that point. And obviously, we can go through and touch on, Denver tried to make things interesting late. Russ magically found Brandon Johnson on a Hail Mary play, and then they set up a 2-point conversion, which could have tied it at 35-35 at that point. Russ obviously went to go look for Cortland Sutton. You can see it clear as day there. Benjamin St. Juste got away with pass interference. They didn't throw the flag in that situation. But here's my point. Denver shouldn't have ever been in that position to have to capitalize on that. They had the 21-3 lead. They couldn't maintain it. That right there is the overall issue that we're discussing here on today's postcast here. And now Denver's at 0-2. And folks, let me remind you, history does not shine very well on teams that start off 0-2. Now we talk about teams that start off 0-2 and lose 2 straight home games. Well, now Denver's got 2 straight road games that are coming up. But in the modern era of the NFL, I believe teams are 2-51, if I'm not mistaken. Teams that have started off 0-2 at home have gone on to make the playoffs. The Cincinnati Bengals were that second team last year. But think about that, since the modern era. So what does this tell us right here about the Broncos? It tells us that Denver is not the team that we expected them to be through 2 weeks. And look, long season, anything's possible. But I can understand why Broncos fans don't have any confidence in where this team is going right now. And certainly I can tell you this, just Sean Payton after the game, he does not like this position. This is something that he even acknowledged. He's never been in this position before. He doesn't like it. So there could be a whole entire ripple effect of things that come forth here for the Broncos going forward here. But Broncos Country, I feel for you here. This is a therapy session. Make sure as you're watching or you're listening to Locked On Broncos, wherever you get your podcast, share your thoughts with us. Usually, as I said, I'm the optimistic one. I like to look at things different ways. But like, even as a coach's perspective, I don't know how to fix what's going on with this Broncos team. They have to find a way to learn how to win, but they always find ways to learn how to lose. And that right there, I think, is the frustrating pain point that we'll continue to discuss here. And one of that happens to be what's going on with the Broncos defense. Well, Broncos Country, we're going to dive deeper into that on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. This episode of the show is brought to you by our friends over there at LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. And with LinkedIn Jobs, it's easy to create a free job post in just minutes. Then all you do, you add your job and the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread word that you're hiring. They have simple tools like screening questions, which make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to hire and who you'd also like to interview. Make sure you finish out the work year strong with the right team member here today. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. And our good friends over there at PrizePicks. Now, the outcome in the Broncos game for PrizePicks was not where Broncos Country wanted it to be. Now, PrizePicks is daily fantasy sports done right. It's the most fun I've had, winning up to 25 times my money this football season. And you just select 2 or more players. You pick more or less on their projected stats, and you place your entry. If you had Russell Wilson throwing for more than 2 touchdowns, congratulations. you won at PrizePicks.com. Unfortunately, the Broncos lost, but maybe you could still come away with a victory. They have quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types, and that's what makes PrizePicks the #1 daily fantasy sports app here today. They offer weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday, and each Tuesday, PrizePicks, they discount select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value to you. So go check it out here today by going to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Once again, go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100 here today. What is going on with the Denver Broncos defense as they have struggled through the first 2 weeks of the NFL regular season, and Sunday's performance provides a scary indicator as to what might happen along the way throughout the rest of the season. Thank you so much, Broncos Country, for tuning in, making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day every single day. Wherever you get your podcasts, Sarah Bettinger, myself, we're super grateful for you. Broncos Country, bear with us. We know times are tough right now, but we're going to cover the team from every angle. I go to every single practice every day. I go to the games and hope to bring you one step closer to the team that you support and that you root for on Sundays, even though things aren't as great right now. And there's always a great saying from my man, Denzel Washington. You ever seen the movie The Equalizer? When you pray for rain, you got to deal with the mud too. And unfortunately, the Broncos, they've been in the mud for 7 years, and they're trying to find a way to get out of there. So is there light at the end of the tunnel? I can't tell you that right now. After 2 weeks, it's very gloomy. It's very dark, and Broncos Country is fed up, and rightfully so. They are frustrated here, but we'll provide coverage every step of the way here. So appreciate you for rocking with us here today on today's episode of the show. But let's talk about the Broncos defense here. Just a really brutal performance for them overall in Sunday's matchup. I mean, not only surrendering 35 points, that's a rough statistic to look at there, because not only that, they're giving up chunk plays on the ground. And look, I go back, and I'm a defensive guy. I'll have to go back and see what the all-22 is, but watching the game live, here's the observation that I came away with. Denver was ultra aggressive. And look, we all heard the statistic last week. According to NFL Next Gen Stats, Denver set the most pressure at the Raiders and Jimmy Garoppolo. We obviously didn't see a lot of success in terms of Denver getting home last week. Part of that was predicated based on their game plan of stopping the run. But we did see the Broncos come away in Sunday's game, getting a little bit more pressure on Sam Howell. I mean, coming up with sacks. I mean, Broncos Country, you look at it, Denver came away from Sunday's game with 4 total sacks. Jonathan Cooper had 2 sacks in this game, including a strip sack that, Washington still recovered. It led to a missed field goal there by the Commanders at that point. Randy Gregory came up with one on Denver's first defensive drive. Nick Bonito came up with one as well. So it was good to see those guys get home, but we have to ask ourselves here, at what cost? Denver being able to fluster and attack, I think what the Washington Commanders, you even talk to their beat writers, talk to David Harrison, the offensive line for them is a little shaky right now. So Denver was ultra aggressive. I mean, we saw inside linebacker blitz. We saw Patrick Surtain blitz on one play. We saw the nickel, the safety blitz from time to time. But Sam Howell, you got to give him credit. And look, this goes to offensive coordinator Eric Bieniemy of the Commanders. He did a really good job of counteracting Vance Joseph, who he knows very, very well, because you get a lot of pressure. Okay, hey, if they're letting you through, it's an indicator, hey, something's not right. If it was this easy for us to get through the line of scrimmage, what's happening? Well, there you go. It's a screenplay. It's a dump off there. And that's where, when you look at Sam Howell, I mean, he finished 27 of 39. He took some shots downfield, but primarily a lot of that yardage came on the ground, yards after catch in the screen game by guys like, obviously, Antonio Gibson, Brian Robinson getting involved there. I mean, heck, Brian Robinson had 2 catches for 42 yards in this game. His longest catch and run was for 21 yards. Antonio Gibson's longest catch and run was 36 yards, and he finished the game with 3 catches for 44 total yards there. Denver just simply got outclassed in this game defensively. They gave up too many plays. I mean, you look at it, they surrendered 388 yards of offense in this loss here. They allowed it 266 yards through the air. They allowed 122 yards on the ground here. But the number one thing is that Denver themselves did not force a turnover, and that is rough. You can't have that. And look, we go back to the whole conversation we talked about with Kareem Jackson getting ejected. You could tell that the Commanders, they went after Delarian Turner-Yell a little bit in this game. And at one point of the game, he suffered I believe it was cramping, did not return to the game. So they had to put Sang Bassi back there at safety. They had to put Jaquan McMillan and Fabian Moreau in different situations, and nickel and dime. And unfortunately, it just didn't work out for Denver in this game. And Sam Howell just did a really good job maneuvering the pocket sometimes. And unfortunately, Denver had penalties as well in this game. And I know it's something we're going to highlight a little bit later on here in today's episode of the show, but for me, defensively, Denver is sending a lot of pressure, but they're also playing off-man coverage quite a bit. They're playing a combination of zone from time to time, and they're not getting to their delayed looks. And what I mean by that is when you're playing zone coverage, and look, I think Denver, sometimes they played a lot of cover 6, which means that you're playing cover 3 on one side, which means corners playing deep third. You're going to have middle third coverage. You're going to have a half coverage on one side. You're going to have the corner playing the flats. Washington did a good job adjusting to that. Denver defensively never adjusted. Sean Payton after the game came out and said that they were very poor defensively. When you talk about efficiency standings in the goal line in the red zone period, Washington converted every single time here. We mentioned that stretch where Denver went punt, fumble, and then interception on 4 drives. Washington converted 3 of those 4 drives into points, right? Touchdown, field goal. That is a huge difference maker here. And it wasn't that Denver wasn't getting off the field on third down. I mean, when you look at it statistically, Denver held Washington to 3 of 10 on third down conversions, attempts versus completions. And then you also look at it, it's more so where did Denver get hurt? Big plays on first down, big plays on second down. That, to me, is what cost the Broncos the game. And I'm very curious to see what Sean Payton's going to do because he was genuinely not happy with what had happened. I don't know how he's going to address it. I know there are a lot of Broncos fans. Hey, a lot of my mentions right now come from fans saying, hey, fire Vance Joseph here. And look, I want to make this point. Like, Vance Joseph obviously is the defensive play caller. He shares responsibility for what happens on Sundays in terms of production and output. But also players got to go out there and make plays too, right? It's not just solely on Vance Joseph. It's on him. It's on players needing to go out there and make plays. And Jonathan Cooper in the locker room after the game said he was pissed off that they need to figure out, they keep talking about they need to finish, but they're not finding ways to do it. And he said it's a frustrating thing for him. Obviously, that was disclosed in the locker room there in a post-game report. But defensively, this team is in a very, very interesting position. And now they may also be without Kareem Jackson next week. And that's something that we'll talk about on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Broncos here. Denver getting to Howell 4 times was not enough. They were able to generate some hits. But unfortunately, they just, like I said, first down, second down, that's where the big chunk yardage plays really came from. Third down wasn't really too much of an issue for Denver, and it's just unfortunate here. And you're going to need to see a little bit more. Like, I think we saw a lot from Randy Gregory, from Jonathan Cooper, from Nick Bonito. I thought those guys were fantastic to watch in Sunday's game, but you need to see a little bit more from Zach Allen. You need to see a little bit more from DJ Jones. Mike Purcell almost had a sack. So it's like, I'm not sure what's going on with the rotation that Denver has right now defensively. They're going to have to adjust because it gets tougher from here on out. The Miami Dolphins are no slouch. As we all know, they can put up points left and right. They're very productive, and you'll get a crossover episode a little bit later on this week from Sarah Bettinger and Kyle Krabs of Locked On Dolphins. But Broncos Country, let's know your thoughts on the defense down below. What is the solution? What ideas would you have here? Denver's in a very, very interesting point as a very crucial part of the season is upcoming here. Week 3, 2 straight road games. We're going to learn a lot about this Broncos team even further, but right now, not looking ideal, not looking optimistic in the eyes of Broncos Country. But what are the constant issues that continue to plague the Denver Broncos? What are things that are fixable? Well, Broncos Country, we're going to dive into that on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. This episode of the show is brought to you by our friends over there at FanDuel Sportsbook. And coming into Sunday's game against the Washington Commanders, the Denver Broncos are 3.5-point favorites in this game. The over-under was at 38.5 points. So if you bet the over in that game, well, guess what? You probably came away with some money if you did that outright versus just taking Denver on the money line here. Snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers at FanDuel Sportsbook, they get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. All you have to do is place a $5 bet here today, Broncos Country, whoever's listening to the show, and you can get $200 in bonus bets here today if you're a new customer at FanDuel Sportsbook. That's $200 in bonus bets, whether you win or whether you lose. And if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action with the NFL season wide open here and a variety of exciting games around the league. The app is so easy to use, and there's a wide range of betting options that include spreads of games, player props as to anytime touchdown scores, first-time touchdown scores, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL. All right, Broncos Country, as you jump into the fourth quarter action on today's episode of the show, just want to say thank you so much to everybody in Broncos Country for tuning in, making us your first listen of the day every single day, and your favorite podcasting provider, whether you listen to us wherever you get your podcasts or whether you watch us on YouTube for free every single day. Make sure you comment and interact with other members of Broncos Country. But Broncos Country right now, not feeling so good after an 0-2 start. And look, I sympathize with you. We've already talked about that here on the show here, but issues continue to plague this team, issues that I think are fixable, issues that I think are preventable, and also some issues that might paint some question marks and concerns in the bigger picture here. First off, let's start off with penalties here for Denver. Now, when you look back at it, 2 weeks, Denver has struggled here. They had 10 penalties in week 1 against the Las Vegas Raiders. That impacted them. In Sunday's loss to the Washington Commanders, they had 9 total penalties that accounted for 58 yards lost in this game. And so what that means is either Denver went backwards or on defense, they gave the opposition forward yardage at that standpoint. And this was a highly flagged game. I mean, on both sides, Denver had 9, Washington had 8. But when you look at where Denver is at right now, they have a total of 19 penalties in 2 weeks. And that's not what Sean Payton is happy about. I mean, and rightfully so. Sean Payton came in. One of the things he said is we need to become a more disciplined football team. And he's trying to instill that. But as we all know, a culture change is very, very difficult. And we all know the NFL, some bang, bang, some plays, it's hard to determine whether or not that's an actual penalty. I felt like there was a pass interference call on Patrick Surtain in this game while he was covering Terry McLaurin that I absolutely did not agree with. And I think that at this point now, it feels like it's almost impossible to play defensive back in the NFL. But then you look at another play like Benjamin St-Juste coming up and blatantly grabbing Cortland Sutton on a pass interference on the 2-point conversion, and they don't even throw the flag. So a lot of it is pick and choose. It's bang, bang. It just depends on, okay, who sees what and who decides to throw the flag and call it. I'm not sure how it works, but obviously there's some flawedness in the NFL officiating scheme of things, but Denver's got to be better. Denver shouldn't have been in this position in the first place to leave it up to question about a 2-point conversion not being called on a pass interference. Denver shouldn't have been in that spot in the first place. And I think that's the frustrating pain point here for Broncos fans here. But I think a more glaring issue here for this team, I'm a little concerned here about the offensive line, and they allowed a lot of significant pressure coming through in week 2 here. I mean, Russell Wilson, we talked about it, sacked 7 total times on Sunday. As a quarterback, he was hit 14 times. You cannot find success in the NFL if that is the formula. And look, here's the deal. I think we can all be honest, right? And I always like to go back and watch the game tape just to make sure, okay, hey, what is what? For me, I look at some of the plays where Russ was sacked or he was hit. Sometimes Russ did hold on to the ball a little too long here. And from the second quarter adjustment, really, I'd say in the third quarter and fourth quarter, the Washington Commanders single-handedly just outmanned the Broncos offensive line. I mean, Daron Payne single-handedly to open up the second half created havoc. He had a sack. He had a tackle for a loss. He also had a tip pass at the line of scrimmage, I believe, there. And that right there, I think, is the issue there. Like, Denver was going up against a really good defensive line, a defensive front seven that we all said coming into this matchup, we know was going to be a good unit, was going to be a problem for Denver. With a 21-3 lead, you think you can maintain that, you can avoid those bad things from happening, but it was a snowball effect, and Denver unfortunately couldn't get it going here. You can't allow Russell Wilson to be sacked 7 times. You can't allow him to be hit 14 times. Protection has to be better overall here. And look, Denver went out in this offseason. They invested so much money in Ben Powers. They invested so much money in Mike McGlinchey. And I think just on first glance here, right, watching it live, my overall takeaway is I think Mike McGlinchey really, really struggled in this game. I think he gave up a sack. He obviously had a holding penalty here. It was a rough showing here for the Broncos offensive line. And I'll have to go back and watch the All-22 to make better judgment. There's only so much we can see as it's happening live in the stadium, or if you're watching on TV, you don't get the full picture. You don't get the entire context to it. But overall, I think on first glance, Denver's offensive line simply got outmanned. And look, I don't think that we can sit here and say, okay, we expected that to happen here, because guess what? You're going to go against very dominant defensive fronts. It is your job as a team. And also on the offensive side of the ball, this goes from play calling, it goes from coaching. You are solely responsible as a coach and instilling this is what we need to do. And as the players, they got to go out there and they've got to execute. They've got to protect better. They got to have better communication. And I'm not sure that was the case here on Sunday. I think there were lapses in all of those categories, unfortunately, for the Denver Broncos. And I think we can go once again, mention the defense. I think ultra aggressive has come back to bite them, but you don't want to be ultra conservative either here. The scheme for the most part is the same as what they did last year, but we're seeing more blitz, more stunt looks, and I would say on a play-to-play basis than I think we saw from Ejiro Evero last year for Denver. And you combine that with condensed formations, guys playing off coverage because you're trying to react to what's being thrown in front of you, what's happening in front of you. That's a tough combination here. And I'd say right now there's some pressure here on Vance Joseph, and I'm very curious to see, what does Sean Payton say to him? How does Sean Payton get on the coaches this week? This is not something that Sean Payton wants. It's not going to tolerate Denver being as bad as they have defensively. And I think right now you look at the overall outlook of the Miami Dolphins, and now Denver's going to go have an 11 o'clock a.m. Mountain Time East Coast road trip, which we all know they have historically struggled with. How is Denver going to embrace this game? Because they're taking on a juggernaut there. Look, you can say what you want about Tua Tagovailoa, but that offense and Mike McDaniel, they do a really great job of putting those players in positions to succeed. You have Tyreek Hill, who's a legit speed threat. Jalen Waddle here. Denver has given up big plays on first and second down. They've been solid on third down this year. But if you're not putting teams in many third down situations and they're converting on first and second, it's going to be a long year here. So Broncos Country, I appreciate you for bearing with me here on the solo episode. My man, Sarah Bettinger, he had a wedding over the weekend that he was attending, and obviously that's more important than I think the outcome of a game. But overall, we're going to talk about this. What are some of the other issues that Denver is facing here? We'll get into some mailbag questions. So if you have some glaring needs, glaring questions that you want to have answered, make sure you drop them in the YouTube comments. If you're watching there, you can send them in to me via my email, which is linked on my Twitter profile there, Cody Roark, NFL. Unfortunately, the Broncos dropped to 0-2, and there is not a lot of optimism right now considering the start, considering the schedule that's coming up, and considering how Denver let a very, very good, ample opportunity to build something offensively and to maintain a big lead against the Commanders fall through the grasps here once again in disappointing fashion. 0-2 to start the season. Broncos Country, let us know how you feel in the comment section down below, or if you listen on social media, you can always tweet us on Twitter, at Cody Roark NFL, at Sarah Bettinger, at Locked On Broncos. But that'll wrap up today's episode of the show. For all you everydayers out there, tomorrow's episode is the aftermath. We'll hear from Broncos head coach Sean Payton in his morning conference call. We'll hear from various players. What is the mentality like now after they watch the film and now they progress forward to the Miami Dolphins? You'll get that on tomorrow's episode of the show.